This is the All-Time Rosters Franchise Cut Day Show. Teams will trim their roster from 60 to 58 next week, but there are a couple of depth charts that may get changed soon as Joe Burrow forces the coach's hand with a sensational comeback in the fourth quarter. 209 yards and 2 touchdowns in just the second half for Joe Burrow. Porcher ends the game in overtime. Burrow, the league leader in passing. Interesting week overall for the quarterbacks as the first stringers only played the opening quarter, second stringers the second quarter, and the third stringers suited up for the second half. An opportunity for Baltimore to test their number one QB, Jackson against Flacco. That question was not answered today. Both quarterbacks had just decent performances. We saw some good things out of Jackson with this 19-yard run. Joe Flacco had the slightly better day, 4 of 6 with 87 yards in the Ravens' visit to Philadelphia. But the story of the day was the Eagles receiver, A.J. Brown. 5 grabs for 94 yards for the Eagles. Hurt certainly was comfortable throwing his way as Brown shined in the win. Philadelphia's Brown may just climb up the depth chart before this one's said and done. He's fighting with Deshaun Jackson and Devonta Smith in the wide receiving core for Philly. Dak Prescott against Tony Romo. The winner of that quarterback battle is the third-string QB. Meanwhile, the loser gets cut. Romo stepped into the second quarter and threw for nearly 100 and a touchdown. Prescott likewise found the end zone with this score to T.O. in the second half of a Dallas rout of Denver. Romo was slightly more efficient, but this battle's deadlocked after 1 week. Meanwhile, at receiver, we saw an all-star performance from Dez Bryant. Not so much for Ezekiel Elliott, who's vying for the final running back spot. 7 carries for just 11 yards for him. Dez Bryant, meanwhile, went for 107 and a touchdown. Impressive numbers, but not as much as Louis Lips, the wide receiver for Pittsburgh. His competition for the final wide receiver spots in Pittsburgh is with Santonio Holmes at the 6 and Mike Wallace at the 7. Only 2 of the 3 will get a spot. The quarterback competition in Chicago is between Jim Harbaugh and Jim McMahon. Harbaugh won that battle against the Bills on Sunday. But nobody is even competing at the running back spot for 4 with Greg Grange. The Galloping Ghost went nuts against Buffalo, all but securing a spot into the final 53 at running back. The final roster spot for the Houston Texans is all but secure for both wide receiver Brandon Cooks and quarterback C.J. Stroud, but they both did their part in the game against New York. C.J. Stroud is currently the third QB behind Deshaun Watson and Matt Schaub. There is no receiver room more talented than the one in Minnesota with Randy Moss, Justin Jefferson, and Chris Carter. The final 3 spots may get shuffled with what happens in the preseason. There's also subject to shuffling from the Chargers quarterback room. Fouts and Rivers are the 1-2. John Hadl and Justin Herbert vying for the 3. The loser gets cut in San Diego. Hadl had a rough second quarter against Seattle. Meanwhile, Justin Herbert shined in the second half comeback for the Chargers, throwing for over 100. Back to receivers, look at the bottom. Greg Jennings, Donald Driver, and Jordy Nelson in this incredible receiver room. Somebody's got to win the job for the 6th spot, and the winner on this preseason opener was Greg Jennings. Tune in a week from today as we officially trim these all-time rosters from 60 to 58. 2 players are getting cut from every team, and then from 58 they'll go to 55, and from 55 to 53 to close the preseason. It should be an entertaining road to 53. Cut days begin next Monday on the All-Time Rosters franchise. Charger Dude 95 presents the All-Time Rosters franchise, the series to determine the greatest franchise in the history of the National Football League. The best 53 players from all 32 franchises compete in a Madden 12 season to determine the greatest franchise ever. The series begins now, and it should be a whole lot of fun. Join us Sundays for highlights and Mondays for the preseason cut days before the regular season begins.